Welcome to the BioSummit Town Hall. We are going to be using some naming conventions today, so if you're just joining us, if I could ask you guys to make sure you're using your name and then put in your affiliation and your pronouns. So if you hover over my name, you'll see those sort of things. If you don't know how to do that, if you look at your self on the screen and you kind of click on your own picture, you'll see a little buttons show up, 3 little dots in the right-hand corner. If you click on those, you can rename yourself. So welcome to BioSummit. For those of you who may not be familiar with the BioSummit Town Halls, this is the last one we will be hosting before the Global Community BioSummit, which is our annual event. We're having our 4th annual BioSummit coming up October 9th, 10th, and 11th. These are events to get us excited about being a global community interested in open source science, DIY bio, community labs, and a whole range of other topics. We are a very global audience, as you'll see with our panelists today. If you haven't applied for BioSummit, please do get your application in. We're really excited about hosting a virtual event this year. We think that the virtual format will let us have even more people participate. So for today's Education Town Hall, I'm really excited to have Carolyn Angleton hosting and being a moderator today. So let me introduce Carolyn to you. So Carolyn has been a part of BioSummit and was one of our BioSummit fellows from last year and is one of the coaches for this year's fellows program. She's returned to help out. She holds a Bachelor's of Fine Art from Colorado State University. She's got a Master's of Fine Art from the Rhode Island School of Design and Fine Arts. She's taught sociology, art and art theory departments at California State University. In Fresno, she worked as an assistant professor in studio arts at Sierra College at Rockland. Her sculpture and biological artworks have been shown throughout the US and in Europe and Japan. She is co-founder of the American River College Biotechnology and Art Collaborative, and she does research on the intersection and aesthetic desire of biotechnological practices. So just to make sure we're running on time, let's go ahead and turn it over to Carolyn. And if you guys don't know me, I'm Maria. I'm one of the co-organizers for BioSummit. If you have any questions, let us know. We are going to keep everybody muted for the main section. So if you have questions, please put them into the chat. So this is going to be a chat event. We are going to be doing breakouts. So we're going to do about an hour of roundtable discussion, and then we're going to break you guys out to have some longer, more meaningful discussions with some of the moderators. So if we don't have anything else, I think I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Carolyn. Carolyn.
All right. Wonderful, Maria. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to take a minute here to give a bit of recognition to both Maria and David for even conceiving of this kind of BioSummit concept. So I wondered if we can all do some snaps for David and Maria for originating this moment that allows us to gather here at this really potent time where much is at stake and much is changing. I also want to thank my collaborator on this panel, Justice Walker. And Justice and I have, over the course of the last 4 BioSummits, continued to have conversations on art, design, education, and social justice practices. And it's kind of the beauty of the BioSummit that you can continue this elongated, evolving type conversation. So thank you very much, Justice, for all the ideas and energy put into this. Today we have a group of distinct and distinguished educators that utilize varied approaches to education within the context of their specific communities. With us today, we have Amanda Obidike from STEMi Makers in Africa in Lagos, Nigeria. And we have Bushra Anjum from Wizkit. She's from Dhaka, Bangladesh. We have Dr. Jennifer Willet, Incubator Art Lab, University of Windsor, Canada, and Dr. Justice Walker, Education Department, University of Texas, El Paso. So, there's a wonderful group here today. The title of this panel, The Changing Nature of Education, could easily be reversed to be read, The Nature of Changing Education. And as we have an audience here of synthetic biologists, biotechnologists, and biomakers, Many of us who are fundamentally involved in synthetically changing nature itself on a molecular level, it's no mystery to any of us that change requires agency. That change is in fact an active endeavor, one that requires intellectual thought as well as hands-on pursuits, that we need to engage our hearts, and that we need to seek educational change in the name of social justice. Many of us in our various fields of education are actually really at a crisis point right now. We're pitched in a fight for the survival of our programs and fear that many of our interdisciplinary and innovative initiatives, ones that we've taken years to build, might be the first ones to go in the midst of budget cutting and intellectual chopping blocks. While at the same time, we're also really keenly aware that it is precisely these models that have a chance to lead us through the work, particularly of our students, to the possibility of a future. So the format we're doing today will be 3 rounds of questions, and then we'll do a breakout room in which the participants will have a chance to kind of plan up what they might like to see for the future of education and talk directly to the panelists. And this all will hopefully prime us for the actual BioSummit education panel that we'll have going in a few months at the BioSummit itself. So for our first set of questions, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have each panelist introduce yourself and the setting that you teach in, describe the uniqueness of that space, perhaps why it came about, or the conversation and the communities that it's involved in. So if you could start us out with that. And Amanda Obidike, I was wondering if you could go first for us. And
awesome.
I think you get it.
Yes, so good afternoon. My name is Amanda Obidike and I am from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much to the community for giving me this opportunity. Like I said, my name is Amanda Obidike and I founded an organization called STEMi Makers Africa. The I in STEM is for innovation. So this initiative was actually born out of the necessity and a need in addressing the STEM education in Nigeria and the leaky unemployment pipeline. We understand that education is the bedrock of socioeconomic development. And upon graduating from school, we lacked technical competence and we were kind of half-baked upon graduation. So coming out of the university, you feel that you have like a good job waiting for you, only for you to realize that what the job market needs is different from what you read in school. So we just had to address this cultural fabric because it was existing. And that's what made us to start STEMi Makers Africa. And my vision for STEMi Makers Africa is building an Africa by us for us. That's like our motto, where we are cultivating a STEM workforce and building young talents that will be prepared for the changing workforce. So, but as for my role, I actually provide strategy leadership. I assist in design and implementation of community projects and our various STEM outreaches in sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you.
Wonderful, Amanda. I was wondering if you could just tell us briefly, who is the specific community that you engage in with?
Okay, so we have 3 major approaches that we work in for STEMi Makers Africa. One is for teachers. So we train teachers. We try to give them project-based learning tools. We try to also train them in capacity building and teaching differently. We know that there's an existing archaic curriculum in Nigeria that needs to be redesigned. So we just try to train them to be modern teachers and also to integrate empathy into their classroom, because that's another important skill that teachers do need in this present age. Then we also, another community of ours is STEMi Women, where we address the unemployment, the underrepresentation of young women and girls in STEM. They are underrepresented, so we try to give them mentorship, where we pair these young women and girls to Africans in diaspora and help these young girls, for a 1-year cycle. Then the third one is offering skill-based trainings to underemployed and unemployed youths. Maybe they're coming out from the university and they're ready for the job market.
Wonderful. That is excellent. And the concept of empathy, that is something that is central right now. Thank you for that, Amanda. Bushra, would you like to go next and explain who you are and the context that you teach in? And I think if you could unmute yourself, Bushra, that would work. Bushra, I'm going to give you a second to figure out the unmuting thing. And let's move on to Jennifer, Dr. Jennifer Willet. Would you give us an idea what you do, what your format is that you teach in and who you are, please?
Sure. I should say, first of all, I'm a bioartist. So I use biotechnology towards the production of art rather than the production of science. So I run an art and biotechnology lab at the University of Windsor. It's called Incubator Art Lab. The University of Windsor is on the border with Detroit, so we're twin cities. We're in the heart of the Great Lakes region. And our lab is sort of culturally and ecologically specific in the types of research that it does, rather than being sort of a floating lab that just does the same thing as other labs. Our lab is driven by sort of the motto, the idea that biotechnology could be a technology of love. And that maybe the way we, I was thinking about Amanda's addressing empathy, trying to design research, but also maybe the structural implementations of how a lab works through notions of empathy and love. We have a BSL Level 2 bioart laboratory that is beautiful. It's designed specifically for artists. It looks like a kitchen, it looks like a domestic space, but it's also a multimedia theater and a gallery for showing live biological artworks to audiences. We have a glass wall that meets the main atrium of the building. And through that wall, we can project our sound, video projection, and do live performances for audiences. The last thing I'd like to say is that we are opening a new space. It is a bioart studio. So we'll be doing studio artwork there. It's in a storefront in downtown Windsor. And we'll also be able to do BSL Level 1 workshops for community engagement with audiences who are not able to enter the lab.
That's great. What would be an example of a type of project one of your students might do?
So every semester, for example, we do a microbial artwork project. And so the students will learn different techniques for casting and staining agar, for growing different colored agar. We do GMO agar. And then the students devise their own projects. One of my favorite ones was just really simple. She did a drawing of her bathtub, and then she swabbed the drain in her bathtub and drew over top of that in the agar. And then the microbes that were growing in her bathtub grew in the drawing of her bathtub, and it looked like bubbles, like sudsy bubbles.
That is wonderful. That is great. Thank you. That's a very unique space that you've been able to facilitate there. Bushra, let's see if you can, if the unmute thing is working on your end.
Yep, it is. Yeah. All right, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Caroline and Maria and Justice, for having me. My name is Bushra. I am the co-founder of an organization. It's called Wizkit. It's based in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And what we basically try to do here is that we try to work with underprivileged kids from impoverished areas who are within the age of 14 to 19, and most of them who have not had the chance to study after or above 5th grade. So what we try to do is we work with them in terms of STEM education. We conduct courses with them, and we do a lot of other hands-on activities with them, which lets them get an idea of what the real world and what the education moving forward looks like. And we completely base our curriculum on STEM, around math, physics, and biology and everything. I personally look after bio because I myself am a bio enthusiast. But how it came about basically was that we were looking at an entire community. We were looking at an entire group of people who were left absolutely neglected, and nobody was really realizing the potential of these children, of these teenagers, that could be done to utilize them if they were made to be a part of an institution or something. So we approached them, and we really sort of thought by ourselves, you know, just to integrate ourselves within the community and try to integrate ourselves with them. And I think that's how the entire operation sort of came about. And yeah, so I'm personally very happy about it, because it gives them, by the time they are done with us, it gives them the eligibility to move on with further education. And if not, we are an education, research, and innovation organization. So if they want to moving forward, if they want to work with us in research or in innovation with the kind of innovation that we do in Wizkit, they're more than welcome to stay back and work alongside us as volunteers, sometimes as contributors, where we just sit down and we just, you know, brainstorm and think of ideas and think of ways in improving our communities. So, yep, that's about it. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we have a little bit of time here. So I want to ask you, you also are developing, you're very involved in developing products to address COVID right now. And one of the things I've been reading about is this booth that you're developing. And I think something that's unique to your model is you're both an innovation hub where you're developing these products, but you're also then directly creating curriculum around them. Could you describe maybe briefly this booth that you've been manufacturing out of your living room, it sounds like?
So yeah, I think after the pandemic hit, we had to stop working from the office spaces and the labs that we had access to, because, you know, lockdown and quarantine and everything, we have to shift all our operations and work at home. So what we were doing initially was that nobody here was taking any kind of, especially because I live in a highly densely populated area, they weren't taking any sort of precautions or any sort of other, maintaining any sort of other social distancing or anything. So we thought one of the most primary ways to provide a sense of security would be through one of these disinfection chambers, where it's where you put where they sterilize you when you walk through it. And yeah, we've been getting a lot of response for that from a lot of big offices and schools. So we're very happy to be doing that. And do I have more time? I think I crossed one.
But we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so you could go a little bit longer, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. So the way we do it is that the children who we initially work with, because the education curriculum that I work with children versus the innovation and the product development that I do is completely separate, but I sort of create this leeway, this segue, where they are, the children are, have the capacity or have the ability to merge with the work that we are doing, and they also have the sort of ability to contribute their thoughts and their ideas into the product development that we do, which I personally think is amazing, because a lot of times, because they are so creative, sometimes some things that we can't think of, some things that we really can't wrap our heads around, they will come up with the most brilliant ideas, with the most genius ideas, and all because of the basic science education that they have had from us. So we're very happy with the work that we do.
That's incredible, outstanding, really interesting model that you have there, and community engagement practices. Let's shift it over to Justice Walker. Justice, I know you have just moved from one university to the other and did a long cross-country trip. Give us an overview of what you have been doing maybe, and also what you're starting up at University of Texas, El Paso.
Thanks, Carolyn. Well, firstly, I want to say it's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and new faces joining the conversation around education. It's an exciting moment for science education, and I think there are directions that we can take to make it really meaningful. And this is one of the sort of moments that I think are going to be instrumental in making sure that happens. So as you know, my name is Justice Walker, and before my current post at the University of Texas at El Paso as an assistant professor, I was a high school biology teacher for a little over a decade. And so for those of you who teach the life sciences to middle and high school students, I know your experience, I know the challenges in public education specifically that you face, and I appreciate them. They've shaped so much my experience in my research. Following that, I joined the University of Pennsylvania at one time the School of Engineering, and then later the Graduate School of Education, where I got a master's in engineering and then a PhD. And during that in education, and so during that period, I studied the use, and I continue to study the use of design in life science. And so this work, or the impetus for this, is born out of something I heard Orrin Katz, the founder of Symbiotica and a bio artist. I think he borrowed it from The Economist, but it went something like this. It was like, we're using 19th century institutions and 20th century tools to teach 21st century skills or literacies, if you want. And my work is consistent with this idea that we're seeing a lot of shifts in the field, namely biodesign, design biology, biomaking, and really synthetic biology. And those shifts are creating so many innovations in so many spaces, agriculture, for instance, commercial manufacturing, and medicine. And yet the way we're teaching students doesn't reflect the creativity and the design thinking and the sort of moment that we are as an industry. And so I use this in my research. We've seen a lot of parallel work in maker spaces and computer science. And so I do a lot of this in biology. I study specifically how students construct knowledge, how they practice science, and how they think about life sciences. And so I do this by creating stepping stone activities or curriculum for middle and high school students so they can begin to think differently about what it means to design with biology. And I don't mean experimental design. I mean, as many of you are aware, repurposing materials and organisms to do useful or creative things. And so it's very typical in the spaces where I've implemented this curriculum for one to see learners of all ages hanging out, exploring materials, or pursuing their imaginations, or if you want, speculative designs beyond what's possible in the lab. It's a bit like what we hope for in all of science, except in these spaces, the rules about how you practice science and what you're supposed to know, those sort of disappear, and it's a neverland of sorts. And in that space where there are no rules, you see a different type of engagement. And so I'm thrilled to be able to pursue this line of work. I care a lot about student learning, and I care a lot about protecting the space so that a lot of folks can participate and join the conversation.
Fantastic. That's really beautiful. Yeah, I remember Justice at a recent SynBioBeta online conference, Drew Endy was talking, and you put in the chat, what age do you think you should start teaching students synthetic biology? And he asked, maybe freshmen in college at the earliest. And you responded by saying, I think this should start in grade school or middle school. And I think that's a really, really strong point that you're pushing forward in terms of the fundamental nature of wrapping kids' minds around these new technologies. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to the second question then, our second round. And the question that we have here is, what is at stake in this moment for your educational model and for educational practices at large? What is potentially being lost, and what are new visions that are being created at this very critical juncture when we see things shifting tremendously? And Jennifer, I wondered if you could start us out with this round.
Sure. So I think that I think everything's at stake. And I think it's very exciting. I think sometimes, like us, we're in a position right now of great tragedy, right? And there's a real struggle and there's real suffering. But sometimes also when there's a cleaving or a schism in our society, that creates an opportunity for change and transformation to happen, right? So questions about education that historically have just been locked down, these sort of Oran Katz models of the modernist education for all as the primary goal, all of that's open now. It's all up for discussion. Who's teaching? Under what circumstances? Are people doing online, at home, hybrid, right? Who belongs in these institutions? Who is authoring and organizing these institutions? So I feel like we're in an exciting moment where we can really address sort of the colonial and authoritative structures in education, the structures of education that are really intended to encourage people to become compliant to hierarchies. You know, it's like a very militaristic system, to allow for these more hybrid, networked, decentralized models for education. And so for me specifically, these are things that we've already been exploring in the lab. I'm really interested in sort of like peer-to-peer mentoring and engaging diverse participants in the type of research that we produce in the lab. I'm very interested in how research and the lab, the teaching combine, right? So my students co-produce the research that we produce in our laboratory environment. A lot of Incubator Art Lab is about making arguments for who belongs here. You know, when I was young and starting out, artists did not belong in labs. Women did not belong in labs. I feel like part of my job now that I've wedged my way into this institutional structure is to widen the wedge and to invite more people who maybe previously had not been welcome in that space. So I think it's all up for grabs, and I think there's positives and negatives. Some of the positives is that with this new digital format, things are more accessible. I wouldn't be having this conversation with any of you if the pandemic hadn't hit and we hadn't all moved to Zoom. But at the same time, I do worry about human interaction. And I think that that's one of the things that we need to really readdress in the future, is like maybe a human to human, or even like human to non-human interactions. What are ways that we can use these networked models, but still allow humans to have downtime, emotional time, embodied time with each other, with the ecology, with other organisms. And so that's sort of things that we're addressing in our research this year, is we're going to look at how to create models for distributed, virtual, educational, bioart workshops that still allow people to have embodied, empathetic relationships with other humans and other organisms. That's what we're thinking about.
Boy, you're thinking. That's what I like about these things. You're thinking it through on really deep levels and really broad levels. And I remember also from when we chatted that you were talking about the idea of hyper-localness in terms of your engagement with organisms and communities. And I also know, that Jennifer has spent the last 10 years seeking grant funding for this brand new space that she has set up there. And it's something that is just coming on board this year and the year before, I believe.
Yeah, so the two ideas that you're bringing up there is hyper-local, but also deep entrenched engagement in a local community and environment, right? You need to build relationships that are a decade long or longer to really have people's trust, to try something new, to go out on an edge, right? And I do think, and this came even before the pandemic, I was thinking a lot about hyperlocal because of our concerns about travel and the environment and sustainability. I was concerned also because I'm actually a mother now. I have a couple of young kids. I used to live in a suitcase, right? And now I have to have a hyperlocal relationship with those organisms. And so I've been really looking at like, what are the ways that we can deeply entrench in our local community and then allow that information and those experiences to communicate through sort of virtual or networked models.
Excellent. Bushra, let's shift to you. What is at stake right now for your model? What's being lost, and what are the new visions that you're evolving as this situation goes?
So how we work here is with the whole physical aspect of it, that everyone has been so far until the pandemic hit, been physically present. So I think that's been a real challenge. I think since the pandemic hit, I think we've had to sort of prioritize with a lot of things, prioritize and reprioritize with our models and how we wanted to continue. And just the fact that it's just disabling a lot of people, a lot of these children that we work with from actually accessing just the future that they saw themselves with. So I think that's really disheartening from our end. We've been really trying, and for the ones, just for a bit of context, not a lot of us have absolute access to internet, absolute access to gadgets. So it's become really problematic to be keeping in touch with these children. It's become really problematic to be for them to sort of keep a sense of normalcy where they can actually follow that curriculum without actually feeling left behind, while having to cope with the sort of the pace of learning that they need to continue with. So I think that's been one of primarily problematic. But I think what we've been also trying to do is we've been trying to be as accommodative as possible with them. We've tried to be more accessible and just reaching out to them personally through phones, through just landlines and through cell phones. I think that's one of a lot of the things we've been trying to do, a lot of that in a very analog, in a very manual way as well. But I think what this does as a whole, what this has been doing in my community as a whole, is that it's been putting a lot of these children into a lot of confusion. Really, I see them sometimes questioning the sort of path that they were following, questioning the method that they've been going. So really disenfranchising them from the future that they saw themselves, maybe in a year or two. So that's been really disheartening, I think, since the year has been rolling about. I think other than that, what's potentially being lost is just the cohesiveness of the community, in a sense that because there's been, I mean, a lot of them have had to social distance. A lot of them have had to quarantine and do a self-lockdown over here. So everything's been put on hold. So yeah.
All right. That's a lot of shifts, a lot of changes, and it's on the backs of very, very young children who have their whole futures at stake. So this is really something that I think a lot of us are deeply feeling what it means to the younger people here. Yeah. Amanda, what is at stake for your model, and what's being lost and what's being envisioned?
Okay, yeah, so presently we have an existing challenge in the continent, which is due to the inadequate number of teachers that are skilled to teach STEM subjects. Now, even the ones that are skilled have a lot of concerns upon training. I remember a STEM integration training that we had for teachers in marginalized communities. They had fear afterwards the training because they don't know how to effectively integrate this. How are the students going to adapt to this change, and etc. So we try to train these teachers to help students make connections between the classroom and the world around them. I know we're also still battling with the lack of teaching tools, the AKE curriculum, and no motivation even from the school admins. So we also help them, like, how can they improve students to comprehend and apply science? So we started this education model where we built an LMS, a platform where is hosted basically for teachers. So they get to design a curriculum or a module, you know, and put it there. It's also a sense of improving their livelihood, because now some people could get to sign up and you can pay for the courses, or you could plan for a scheduled instructor live classroom. So we just try to look at this circumstance and look at how best these teachers can, you know, move from point A to point B. So, and we have our community initiative that requires a more integrated approach, not just to education, but involving these schools, their communities, and etc. So, and we also try to teach them not to only integrate or learn technical skills. Soft skills is also very important. We raise them enough not just to be instructors, but to serve as role models, to serve as mentors to these young people. And this is important to us in STEMi because if you look at it in the statistics, we have the youngest youth population in the world of over 200 million between ages 15 to 24. And 63% of these talents are faced with this instability in school or accessing the job market upon finishing and etc. So these are the things we try to do, try to get this issue and address this issue from the bedrock, which is from the school and from teachers.
That's great. I know that I think it's a unique model that you're actively training and mentoring other teachers. You know, you're not just directly teaching in the classroom, and I know you're also involved in this council of 100 scientists. So you're really involved in kind of the meta or the broader view of things with that. And I know that you've also talked about this idea of workforce training, that there has to be something that addresses people's livelihood in education. It can't just be education for the sake of education itself. I think those are very powerful issues that you're trying to focus on with that. Justice, you want to round us out? We got about 2 more minutes left in this one. What's at stake? What do you feel like is at stake at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I have to echo probably the sentiment everyone else is sort of asserting, both in the chat and even my co-panelists here. Everything, right? Everything is at stake. Right now, and for the past decade, there have been more than that, really. There have been whole communities and even bioeconomies developing in some of these emerging fields and in the background. They in fact touch the very fabric of our life, what we eat, the medicine we take, how we scale production in various fields like textile production and such. And so while this is all happening, very few of us are even thinking about education and how we might, you know, make a difference. And so what's at stake? The future of our innovations, our future and what we're able to produce and how we might make it available to everyone. The future of our citizens, right? Like, who will know how to critically engage the type of industries that are developing and their impact on us? Equity, power, the list goes on, right? And we have a lot of lessons to learn from computer science, which is why I'm going to continue to bring this up. And this is going to be the era of me saying, let's look back at our older cousin, computer science, and realize how that has impacted the whole structure of education, who gets to participate. The pandemic has sort of surfaced all of these sort of issues. And so what's at stake? For education, specifically, if I were to go there, we know that innovations in education, there's always these underlying issues of the desire to measure, assess, test, or whatever, right? That's inherent in education, and underlying that even is these issues of powers and who gets to decide what the educational priorities are. I heard Erica Halverson, who's a computer science and a maker expert out of the University of Wisconsin, describe this sort of threat of this power and assessment as the STEM monster, right? Reaching our schools and saying, well, these are the priorities, and you can't achieve mastery until you achieve these priorities, which is really, in many ways, an instrument of oppression, right? And so I think we have a lot to learn from that type of thinking. That is to say, how do we protect our very spaces and their perfect sort of imperfections from the STEM monster? And how do we empower others to protect it, as not to reify the inequities we see in CS, computer engineering, engineering, business, government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it matters, as others have said, that we ask our young kids to think critically about that and to challenge the status quo and to make sure that they're allowed to be at part, because everything, as to echo Jennifer, Bushra, and Amanda, is at stake.
Yeah, thank you. Everything's at stake right now. Everything's at stake. Yeah, yeah. Let's, I know there's a couple of questions out there. I'm gonna hold on to them for just a second and try and roll through our third question there. Thank you for that reminder. Our third question here is, it gets to some of what we're addressing right here, is that education centers around handing off power to the future generations with the tools, the paradigms, thought processes by which these future generations will shape new futures, new endeavors. And so what I want to ask the panelists is, do our new models challenge or reify/replicate colonial structures? Secondly, do our new models address gender issues? And third, do they incorporate recursive or reflective processes with that? And I'm trying to look at who we want to go. I think I'm just going to reverse. And Justice, I'm actually going to let you go first here, and because you were just talking about some of this. So I know this is very central to your model and your just deep, heartfelt concerns about education. Could you specifically continue, I guess, what you were just saying along
Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn, and I'll keep it brief so that others have space to sort of chat, and then I get to sort of interact with the smaller groups. But I think one of the things we have to think about when it comes to the future is how we might not repeat our errors in the past. And that's hard because it requires that we, within ourselves as individuals, be sort of reflective in the moment as not to, you know, contribute to the emergent quality of inequity, yeah, or, you know, whatever you want to characterize that as. But one of the strategies I've taken, and this is just a continuation of me describing the older cousin in CS, is that I've always in my career connected with people who've been forward along the pipeline. And I've done that for two reasons. One is because to me, they tend not to have any stakes in my success or helping me or things, right? There's no horses in that race for them. But then the more important one is I've always viewed that as being able to look into the future, right? And someone who's my senior or a mentor has been able to tell me sort of, or suggest to me where the pitfalls are so that I can be better. And I view CS as being this sort of space, right? Where we know since the 90s and up until now, where children, babies are they sort of intuitively understand that you can interact with the screen. We know that CS has had this long trajectory that has woven into the very way we interact with each other in society, starting from education on through your lived experiences. And so I think one of the things we might do more carefully and thoughtfully is engage with our older cousin a bit more. There's a book called Stuck in the Shallow End by, remember two of the authors, Joanna Good and Jane Margolis, and they describe, and this is sort of a great metaphor for what I mean, Jim Crow laws that prevented people of color in the United States from going into public swimming pools. And as a result, multiple generations later, we see that people of color disproportionately die of drowning when they go swimming. And this sort of artifact that has followed us through generations has such enormous impacts on us to this very day when we know that that was problematic. And so they use that metaphor in the title of the book to describe CS, right? Like where we didn't give a lot of folks the sort of opportunities to sort of engage with it. And I would sort of reaffirm that idea in our current moment. How do we, again, bring together diverse people, blur the margins, right? So baking a GMO fortified cake, which is something I've worked on in my research, counts as science, right? And so those are some of the things I think about, and I hope to sort of continue my work, and I hope you think about as well.
I think that's something for all of us to think about. That's very powerful. Amanda, do you want to pick up from there, and you can focus on any of those three issues? Do models challenge or reify, replicate colonial structures? Do they address gender issues? Are there recursive and reflective processes in what we're doing?
Okay, yes. So first of all, you know, the future economic growth of Africa as a continent, it actually depends on an aligned education and future-focused system that supports developmental efforts in generating talent, especially women, you know, needed to become self-reliant, technology problem solvers, and, you know, critical thinkers using science, technology, or innovation. And if we were talking about the gender issues, I think it's addressing it because it's delightsome to see various initiatives, whether locally or continentally, designing programs that are addressing these cultural norms that are existing for women. You know, so now women are, say, bold enough to take on courses. Like I get to see on Twitter, there is this Black in data, Black in engineering and all. A lot of women are coming out boldly to say that, okay, this is what they have been able to effectively go through from the four walls of the university. And this is what they're ready to do to the world. So when we see this change happening, it shows that is a right step in the right direction, although it's not, we can't really be sure of like 100% correction, but I see now that there is a change. Women are taking up difficult courses, like they say, or, you know, very tough things to read in the university, and they are really excelling. And one of the things that are actually contributing to it is mentorship. Most of them, I know that maybe early 90s and all, for example, lacked career and academic support. Because from my background, I read administration, business. I have nothing to do with science, but, you know, coming out, I found out that science is really imperative. But now we're seeing this change because a lot of mentoring programs are coming up. People are willing to give their time, their resources, just to ensure that women are part of this new socio-economic chain that is existing. So yeah, I think that is addressing gender issues.
Thank you. It's really important who's at the table in these discussions right now. And in order to be able to have a full voice at the table, you need to have access to the education and set of ideas that will allow you to enter the dialogue. And so I think this idea of mentorship and specifically looking at gender issues and how to uplift women to take on what you said are these more serious courses in science, and the fact that they are excelling at this point, I think is very telling to what are the models and what are the structures that we need to change. Thank you for that. Bushra, do you want to tell us, you can pick any aspect of that to focus on in terms of how are we handing off power to the future generation, and are we doing a good job of it?
Yeah. So I think I just want to, so, you know, here, everything that we do, every aspect of our lives, not just education, has been shaped so rigidly by 200 years of colonialism that for me, for my grandfather, for my great-grandfather who's been alive, if I want to look back 3 generations, I don't know what the structure of this present land looks like. Be it education, be it anything else, really. I can't, even if I try and dig back maybe like 300 years, I have no idea. But what happened as a result is that we were introduced to education, we were introduced to structures, but now we don't have a sense of direction. It's something that we've been taught and something that we are continuing doing without really asking the right questions. And I think one of the primary questions is that, why are we doing it? And I think if I look at my community over here, it's still continuing. It has still been continuing in a way where we've really been sort of just carrying on without really putting any thought into why we're doing what we're doing. So, you know, I think in order to answer your question, I just have to say that the model that, you know, the way we see it right now is that the model, I think something that Abhay said in the chat box is that it just does not need to be edited. It needs to transform completely. I want to also mention some of the things that Justice has said as well, that it really needs a complete new makeover, I think. And the way I see it, if that's been done, and it really will address all sorts of issues. You think of disability, you think of gender issues, you think of caste issues, you think of anything really. It's really, the time really is to transform and for every system to be completely, absolutely integrative, completely, just absolutely anti-exclusionary. So you be from any corner of the world so I think I also have to mention that especially the education system here is absolutely selfish. It's absolutely individualistic. So I think the only answer to this is a total transformation. I think otherwise we will just be going in a direction where we will just blindly keep on going without any end to that journey. And I don't speak of this just as a community. I speak of this as an entire civilization, and just the people, just the people that I specifically represent. I think it's problematic, but there are ways that we can come out of this problem only if we put our minds and our grits to it.
That's some powerful stuff, and that echoes something that Abhay has said in the chat, that we need total transformation. And that we as a world, as world citizens, are just blindly going on and nothing is changing, and that we need a fundamental sense of change. Jennifer, how about you round us out with what do you think's happening right now?
I couldn't agree more with the previous panelists. I think that colonialism and patriarchy is so deeply entrenched in our global manifestation, and it is really so pervasive, and it's built into the structure of how we learn, how we engage with one another, so much so that it's almost invisible at times. One of the things that I've really experienced as an educator, you know, I started 20 years ago, and I was a really young radical artist, very politically active, and I was going to stick it to the system, and I've really worked my way through the system and tried to transform the system, but the transformation has been mutual, right? And now I'm this middle-aged bureaucrat, and it sort of happens very slowly over time. You think you're going to change the system, but it's very powerful, and it changes you. It has physically transformed my body with all the paperwork and meetings I do. It has transformed my mind and how I think and how I manage space and move through the world. So I think in terms of what can I offer my students, what do I have to hand off? I've pushed really hard. I'm going to continue to push hard. I've created this wedge. Again, is sort of that idea that I think about. Mentorship is huge. And I think mentoring people towards their own goals rather than my goals or my institution's goals is really important, because I am still a product of that institution that I'm attempting to transform. So what I do is I really try to teach students how to be fearless, how to go places they don't belong, how to ask questions, how to challenge me, even when it gets really uncomfortable. And I think I got one of the best compliments from a student who graduated a few years back. She said, Jennifer, I don't know what I want to do yet, but I know I want to do something that doesn't exist yet. And that's the best I can do, is open people's minds to this future that we don't even know what it is, empower them to be confident enough to take the time to do that, and support them through the steps to achieve that.
Wow. Something that never has existed before, and that's the goal of your student. That's incredible. We're at time now, but I want to lift up a couple of comments in chat from Chimsy. They are asking, education is intertwined with health. How are we working on bridging the gaps between education and health? And then there is another question that Chimsy addresses. is the education we're speaking about here only encompassing those gained from academic knowledge, or are those gained in skilled and trade schools? Those are two excellent questions. I think, Amanda, you are addressing trade schools in a sense with what you're doing. I know the place that I've found as a bioartist to get education was actually a workforce training program at a community college out here in California. So I think those are very good questions, Jimsy, and perhaps we can address those in our breakout session as we go. So that concludes our rounds of questions. Some beautiful, beautiful answers, very profound thoughts that people are putting forth there. And I want to lead us into our breakout rooms. We're going to try and do 4 breakout rooms. There'll be a panelist in each room and also one of our organizers. And organizers, Maria has prepared a doc for you to take notes on, and also don't forget to hit the record button when you start. Panelists, you're the ones to lead the breakout session. And we're going to do the breakout sessions around this idea. It has to do with a method, I think, commonly used as artists in their artistic practice. And it's something called future scenarioing. I'm making up a word and making it a verb here. And here's the idea. By linking historical knowledge, what was, to current political and social events, what's here and now, we can use an envisioning process to create multiple and pluralistic versions of possible futures regarding educational models that we might wish to manifest. So that's a mouthful, but it's how do we use our envisioning process, not an arbitrary one, but one that's linked in historical and social current political thought. How do we use these to create a thread to our future that's one that we actually want? So we'll be discussing that, and we want to, as a group, in your breakout groups, come up with some ideas there. So Barry, I think you're going to lead us to the breakout rooms, and we'll do that for 20 minutes and then reconvene for 10 minutes. Thank you all so much for being here.
So I'm just going to start with sort of a prompt that I've been thinking about as a way to think about why some of these power issues persist, and maybe as a starting point to discourse. I know that we're a global group here, but I've observed that at least in the United States, these issues of power persist almost like they're so ingrained in the fabric of who we are. And I started to think, well, what if our individual actions and individual moments are blind spots that create an emergent quality of racism and inequity? What if in my conversations as a middle-class, privileged, Black male, privileged in one way, but not privileged in others, what if my day-to-day interactions with people, like cigarette butts, you know how you toss a cigarette butt and then it eventually becomes a worldwide issue, or plastic? What if that is the same phenomena we're observing on every camp? And how do we sort of fix that? How do we change in the moment as a teacher how I'm assessing my students and being okay with that? And how do I sort of address that in the institutional structure that I exist within? And I don't know if that's a good place to start, but I wonder if we could take that up and then let this evolve.
I love that metaphor of the cigarette butts, Justice. I think it highlights like the individual responsibility and how that might thread and be part of a bigger institutional change. But how do you start with yourself? It's always where we have to start with practice, right? And I think some of these challenges are so huge. It's good to anchor in the smaller first, right? Like when we look at the plastic issue that you raised, the numbers are so high that it's easy just to ignore it and hide from it. But when you reduce it down to small individual responsibility, then you build a vocabulary to address it as well.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah.
I can actually relate to, because at work at our makerspace, we actually figure out that you do what you preach. If I want kids to clean after themselves, and I cannot just say, please clean the table. I need to, first of all, help them in showing what I mean by cleaning, or what I mean by recycling, or what I mean by taking this piece and getting, because everyone understands it differently. What does it mean to put it in the right place, or what does it mean clean? It's all it's like we are talking in different language, whether I'm talking to 6-year-old or 20-year-old, because the people are so different. And then first I take my energy and my time to show them what I mean by doing that, and then I also help them. And then it's kind of, I try to be conscious of what I do, because I cannot just one way ask them to take care of certain thing and then do absolutely opposite. Because non-verbal, 65%, I think by research, that non-verbally we communicate more than verbally. So, I mean, it's probably just working on yourself, on what you actually act out, is probably the way to change the situation.
That's so powerful. Like, it's like to connect both of these ideas, the idea of like what Corinne is saying, like being explicit about the frame, or coming up with a framework or a vision, and then coming up with a way to sort of enact it in your daily life as to sort of practice what you preach. Do others have thoughts around that idea? Like, what does it look like to sort of practice what we all hope for?
Yeah.
I'm gonna type in. So for us, I think one of the things that I love about getting to work at GenSpace with the people I get to work with is that we have a lot of like designers and design thinkers, and they're really good at like future world building. Like that's their thing. And so they facilitate us through these kinds of thinking exercises, whether that's like imagining what our future food restaurants will look like, or imagining what our programmatic portfolio will be. So it's like, it's leaning into the like imagination and the expertise of especially of the designers. I think they're the ones who do it really strongly, especially when I get stuck in my like, well, that's not logical brain. So that's been really fun. It's just to like lean into the world building skills of our community.
What would be an example of a process by which you lean in? Like, how do you do that at GenSpace?
Yeah, I mean, it really takes good facilitators, right? So that's kind of key to the process. But two examples that are coming to my mind, one is like a little bit more fanciful. It's not really related to like education. Is that okay? You guys are okay with this as an example of like our process? So we did a Future of Food Thanksgiving event last fall. And so we were imagining, we were like kind of drawing off the concept of lab grown meat and other kind of food and biotech applications. And this designer who was at, oh gosh, I'm having a hard time remembering where his school is, but he was visiting at Pratt and was working on kind of design thinking as a tool for science engagement with the public. And he like facilitated us through brainstorming into like consensus building, into like then actually like prototyping or like designing the thing that it would look like, all the way through like then sharing that idea out into the world. So like that kind of exercise of going from kind of fanciful future to like, what could it actually like look, feel, smell, taste like? That was the experience. And then more recently, some of our colleagues and collaborators have been working on like, or we're working on building up a workshop that will think about climate resiliency with the same kind of model.
That's great. I'm reminded of an activity that I've done with middle school students that on the surface looks like just a baking activity, but when we designed it, we were intentional about sort of, remix is the wrong word, but we wanted to really push it when it came to like thinking about social construction. And so what we do is we borrow a yeast strain that came out of an iGEMS project, and I think that Natalie Caldell uses in a bio builder lab activity. And we had kids bake cakes with it. And so what they did was they genetically transformed the yeast to produce the vitamin A. Then they designed these silicone molds, come up with their own baking ingredients. And then they come up with these like sort of product pitches around why it might be useful and what the pitfalls of using this is. And for some students, they're like, we're baking in this course. And I love to hear the males say that, right? Because it sort of creates a tension around these social constructions that we live in that we don't even realize are sort of defining how we operate. And what you said, Beth, really strikes me as that, like creating a space, rethinking Thanksgiving in the context of like, and then the tensions that exist even with that, you know, sort of thing. Have any of you others sort of experienced like the tension in social construction and science, and what was that like? And by that, I mean, like, what boys can do and girls can do, et cetera. Sorry, Amanda.
No, that's all right. So it's not my core research, but a good friend of mine, Amanda Sullivan, does research on gender stereotyping. And I think I was really interested to hear Bushra talk about, you know, early childhood, because so Amanda's work basically found that even as young as 5, so children in kindergarten, we see some pretty deeply ingrained stereotypes about, you know, even just using technology that's available on the consumer market, who's invited into what type of environment. Women are expected by 5-year-old children in the US of the Northeast to prefer round, white, smooth technology. They're more likely to get shocked if they use, for example, open machinery. Girls aren't as good at Legos. And a lot of this comes from, I think, what Adriana was saying about modeling. You know, they get these ideas from watching the roles that their family members take around the house and internalizing who their teachers are and what their teachers are in sort of uncomfortable doing. And that, you know, kids are always listening and always watching. And it's just, I think part of the challenge of modeling and being a good mentor, I really love the phrase good ancestor that Layla Saad has coined. It really comes down to a lot of self-work. And I think that, as at least in my experience in the milieu that I work in, which is a very like ivory tower institution of academia, self-work is sort of frowned upon as a waste of time, unfortunately, rather than the core of an educational framework that we might move forward from.
Yeah. Hey, Sahid, you wrote a great comment in chat. Would you like to speak a little bit about some of that? Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, sure.
I think, Sahid, if you could unmute yourself. There you go.
All right. Good. So great and so pleased, hi, to be here. I really love the conversation. Discussing about education is something great. Apart from that, in Nigeria, where I am, and in my community, we are getting youth and women involved in agriculture, whereby there are some value chains in agriculture, for example, marketing and value add and packaging, whereby they are engaged productively in agriculture. Apart from getting them involved in agriculture, we also give them trainings, teachings, technical backstopping, and capacity building to make sure to make them sustainable enough. So many of them are young, some are old, but we teach them best agronomic practices to have a very good harvest at the end of their agricultural production. Apart from that as well, during a pandemic, where food became a unifying factor between the poor and the rich, we make sure that we try as much as possible to get them on how they can have best agronomic practices to have a good yield and harvest. So all around, we've been doing these back and forth, getting them involved, and letting them know the beauty and then the prestige in the work through education, so as to let them know that agriculture and then is something that is laudable, and it is something that is celebrated all around the world.
So I wonder if there are other perspectives that others wanted, sort of, that were inspiring from the larger group conversation that someone wanted to sort of, or if anyone hasn't had a chance to share and you have something sort of building up that you want to like sort of put out there.
I just wanted to go a little bit backwards with Sahid. So Sahid, what are the models that you're using to communicate this knowledge about agriculture and crops? What are the settings in which this knowledge is passed from one generation to the next?
All right, the ways we are communicating this knowledge to them is number one, through hands-on. What I mean by hands-on is through practical way of doing it. We get them on the field, then we show them how it is being done practically. When they do it practically, it's sticking to their skull, they won't forget again. Then another thing is we show them videos, YouTubes, and how it is being done elsewhere, so that they can compare and know they are actually doing the right thing. Another way we do it is by taking them around our neighborhood, our communities. We let them see what is being done in other communities, so they see truly they are doing something that is good. Then when after all these, we tell them, when you get it right, you see your crops, your plants coming out fine, looking green. It shows you have done something wonderful. Then at the same time, we are also preaching eco-friendly farming, such that we are not polluting the ecosystem.
That sounds great. Do you have community centers, or where do you show these videos? Where do you gather people? If you want to show a video.
All right.
Whoops, I think you got muted.
Yes, I'm with you. If we have a community whereby we publicize our activities to them. Then we let them know there's going to be training at a particular date in a social venue. For example, I am a graduate research fellow with ITA. As such, there are some trainings that we convey, and in that training, we project to them, we teach them, we show them the video in the training, and at the same time, after showing them the video, we take them to the field, as I've said earlier, for them to see how it's been done practically. So when we conduct trainings, we show them the videos, the slides, pictures, how things is being done correctly in the trainings and the trainings we organize.
Got it. Really great. Ibrahim, do you have any kind of model you want to put forward, or you're thinking about it all? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Please take that again, please.
I was asking Ibrahim whether he has any models that he might want to put forth, or any thoughts about what we're talking about. Thank you, Sahid. Those are very strong observations and lessons to learn.
Sahid. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Let's see. I didn't have a particular model, but I think just the more I guess what how really to learn from other experiences and how really it's been done. I guess how really it's been done before. So I don't know how to put my thought, but
what is the community what is the community model that surrounds you where you are, Ibrahim, for education?
I mean, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but
are you, let's see, like people have asked things like, are people involved in workforce training programs? Sahid talked about kind of direct education in the field. A number of us come from academic education,
yeah,
but a whole different group of models.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what has been your access to education?
Oh, my access to education is very traditional. Just I'm doing my PhD, so it's just I guess very traditional from academia, and also just what other approaches that I was involved in other DI biolabs. So I'm not sure if I can really add to exactly, or I'm not sure if I have any like.
That's great. That's fine. So we're just listening and learning a lot of things. I think we might be sent back now. Justice, do you want to wrap us up with anything?
You know, I'm sad that we're already ending because there's so much to say. I know others have things to say, but the good news is that we'll be able to continue this discourse at the Bio Summit. And if you're interested in having the conversation with any one of us, please reach out. I'd love to continue the talk. Glad to hear that everybody's thinking about similar things and learning. It's fitting. Craig, I hope to be able to interact with, I know Biotech Without Borders. I know that community. I hope to be able to interact with you at some point. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, mostly I was just trying to listen from all the different feedback. I've definitely kind of been an active member of that community. Got my start at GenSpace doing community biology through micromediation, opening up my project community, doing lots of teaching and doing engagement, middle school, high school, and iGEM team. But the biggest thing which I'm excited about for the fellowship that I'm a part of and events like these is hearing the other perspectives of people around the world and trying to be a resource if they have questions or details, because I have a lot of direct experience that was
perfect
in there.
Xavier, sorry, I just want to, in our last 30 seconds, you want to give you a shout out.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hello, thanks, Justice. I'm a biomedical engineering PhD student and cybersecurity master's student. And great to listen in on y'all's perspectives too. Oh, sorry, I don't have enough time to really go in, but feel free to message me.
Bio Summit. He's an organizer of the Bio Summit, so if you have questions about Bio Summit, ask him.
Indeed.
Nice.
All right, so I'm going to stop recording. And does everyone else see a button to return to the main session?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so you can go ahead and
do
that now.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
The Magic School Bus. I don't know if you are aware of the Magic School Bus. Bushra, yeah. Anyone else? Awesome. Yeah, so it's going to be interactive. It's going to be, I just want everyone to share our thoughts. And before I proceed, is there any unique thing you feel that we could resonate with for Magic School Bus then, and something that is happening now or something that is not happening now in science education and media? Anyone? Okay. Okay, so why I'm sharing this is, you know, growing up, and I think we can also resonate with that. You know, watching Mrs. Fraser, you know, it teach science education differently was hard for me. Up to now, I remember still having some of these images in my head compared to now. So why I'm bringing this is, Magic School Bus was actually very different. Although it wasn't hands-on, but it was a different kind of experiential learning, you know, where she has to shrink her students, you know, and they get into this Magic School Bus and they get to like visit an area, a thematic topic. It could be that they're talking about their hearts, then everyone goes through somebody's body system and see everything. I'm saying this because presently now we are not really seeing that happen, you know, where media is translating or sending science education to young ones or to us. And that's really unfortunate. And that actually goes on to what Nell shared about Mr. Saken of blessed memory about having education transformed. Now, I know that we have, or there could be wonderful initiatives that can like go beyond Magic School Bus, like as a cartoon, but we're not seeing that happen. So the whole idea of this conversation is how can we like envisage science education into the future? So I think Jim is raising his hand.
Yeah, this is a really good point, because if you take a look, especially when it comes to SynBio or biology, there are so many, you know, coding or math or robotics inspired stuff. But when it comes to SynBio, the closest thing that we've experienced, and I'm a father, I have a daughter who's in SynBio, is the Wildcrats. And I don't know if you're familiar with that show. They take on creature powers, but it's not SynBio. And there's really very little out there if I'm in grade 2 or 3 or 7 or 8 to say, hey, I want to do a career in biology. We're not capturing the kids early enough, and it's too late. Right now in Canada, only 0.6% of people are choosing biology careers to go into post-secondary biology programs. If we want to capture them early, we need them to see a future in biology, I believe, and to see the cell as a makerspace and ATCG as a coding language. That's my thoughts, and we're not doing that yet.
Yes, yes. Oh, wow. Thank you, Jim. I really love this. And I want it to be very interactive. I know that Jim has shared his own perspective. I know that we've been seeing what's happening presently now, but we need to get this right, because it's what's going to shape whatever decisions we're making into the future, whether for our children, our siblings, or, you know, in years to come. So it also goes to say, like, what are the several approaches you think that we can use to increase students' interest and motivation? Anyone? Should I ask that again, Orlando?
That might be helpful. I think we lost you for a minute there, Amanda. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So I was asking about what are our thoughts and what ideas do we have as designing approach that can increase students' interest in science education?
Get them in front of a microscope is my answer. And it doesn't have to be a very elaborate microscope. Anything that they can see microcosm, it's amazing. I discovered biology at the age of 50. It's never too late, Jim.
Wow, thank you. Well, personally, I think we should start integrating stuff like project-based learning activities for kids. You know, just like Dr. Jennifer said, like students, you know, going where they ought not to go, or, you know, changing that stereotype, being advanced, because still when you are being minded, that you can get various things that science has for you, because science is exciting, you know, and as the day goes by, we begin to discover. So I think that's my thought. I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
I'll share a small quote again, like which I shared previously. I think it is, Sir Ken Robinson again. He talks about how we have to go from what is essentially an industrial model of education, which is a manufacturing model, which is based on linearity and conformity or batching people. And we have to move from there to a model based on the principles of agriculture, where we recognize that human flourishing is not only a mechanical process, but it's an organic process. And we cannot predict the outcome of human development, and all we can do is, like a farmer, create the conditions under which they will begin to flourish. So it's more like we personalize the education with respect to the students themselves, right? So we really ask students questions on what they want to learn. So that's how we personalize it in the first case. So that's my thought about it, of what Sir Ken Robinson said again.
Yeah, true. I agree to that. We need to let students figure out questions and let them, the same way they ask, that's the same way they should respond independently. Personally, I also know there's this model that I have that works, and is mentorship. I always say it every time I see it work. And now that we know better, I feel that we're in the better position to train and groom these younger ones, or like our peers. Some people know less, but they're open to learning. So it's about exposing them, giving them that
makes sense.
Academic support, or the that blended learning support, exploring with them, because the both of you are together, or more of you are together, but you have the ability to co-create, you have the ability to do stuff together. So and I just feel that it should be like a take home, because we can start it. It's something that we can do in our community, or there are a lot of people that may be looking up to us, but we don't know. But it's just about reaching out to them and offering this mentorship, because trust me, it's been valid, it works. Right. Thank you.
With the word mentorship, I kind of got reminded of what Abel Cano said in one of our fellowship sessions. So it's more like coaching, where we ask the students questions, and he said a dialogue which really touched me. He said, like, people are the sources of their own wisdom. So all we need to do is to incite that, right? We need to ask the right questions so that they come out with solutions by themselves, instead of we giving solutions as mentors. So the basic responsibility of a coach is to just ask the right questions and spark the students themselves, right? Just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you, Abe. Thank you. So does anyone else want to share? Remember, it's we're all meant to have a conversation around this. So I think we should hear from Orlando. Is there anything you would like to share?
I don't know. I'm feeling very cynical today. I don't want to be negative. I found your presentation very inspiring. I do just think, STEM can be a pathway for people to build a better life for themselves by getting great jobs, and that kind of workforce development is pretty important. But it's maybe not the most exciting and fun, and I feel I'm a synthetic biologist as my day job at university, and I kind of feel so maybe thinking about STEM education, I feel like where my research is not, I don't really feel like it really helps the world in any way. And that I feel like STEM education, there's so many really pressing global challenges, environmental challenges specifically, I think, where biology and STEM in general is so important in being able to deal with them, and that to me should be really central in STEM education. And maybe I'm just thinking about myself, but I feel like that's very inspiring, and it's something that can help like kind of motivate people in STEM education of like, this isn't, it's fun and it's creative and exciting, but this is actually like, if we don't kind of work out, like the world is sort of dying right now, not to be dramatic, but like you, like the STEM learners of today, like you're gonna have to fix this. It's kind of, we've made terrible problems that we kind of need to solve together. Sorry, that was a bit rambling.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Orlando. You know, speaking of, yeah. So you spoke about automation. You know, I saw this recent analysis by the International Labour Organization, which said that you know, 96% of jobs are now automated. You know, so now the skills that we need are STEM-related skills, transferable skills. So it just goes beyond, you know, the institution. But what are you using these skills to do? How are you preparing yourself to be prepared for the workforce? Because, you know, the workforce has changed. What we used to do in the 90s or maybe late 80s is not what we can do now. So I buy your idea of, you know, having to calm down and be serious about STEM education, because I think it's everything now. So yeah, thank you. Who else? Salman, is there anything you'd like to share?
Hi. Thank you so much. I have been listening to many of the education leaders because I can see here Christiana, Abhay, and many of you actually have been working on that. So I myself have some of the curriculum and like organization for, I mean, underprivileged, and I also like internationally like try to train certain skill sets. But I might want to point out some of the issues we are facing right now. Even we have started a bus service for children since we like Jacksana, like a mobile lab and go to places. But what I mean to say is this third world country like us, like Bangladesh and some of the other countries, maybe world is getting automated. They're getting education through online system platforms. There are like lots of them. But most of our population, like 70% of our population, they're kind of like underprivileged. So it's really hard to get them under any sort of a platform to make them, you know, to access them. And also sometimes when we are limiting the number by, you know, social distancing, for example, we could have like accommodate like 50 people in a class. Right now we are being able to only 10 or 15. So we have to increase the number of time, I mean like the periods of teaching. So I think maybe we can have some light on that, how we can make it more efficient, like keeping in our head that, okay, like this is like that, pandemic like that, maybe it will come back again or some other factors. So how we can make it efficient, like time, space, making education more accessible. Like I know we are all thinking about science, but I think economy has a very big factor playing here, even the job market, right? So maybe like some of us like, or like, I mean, the world economy is not controlled by the scientists. It's also capitalist. There are other things.
Correct,
right?
correct.
So maybe we can, the thing Christiana has been focusing on, like linking business with education, like giving equip people with our skill sets so that they can contribute to the economy. So they will learn, they'll contribute to the economy, and they can earn their bread. I mean, if people like us, that's our daily need, that, okay, I need to think about my education, I need to think about my food or my healthcare, because right now the world is seeing how healthcare is collapsing under this kind of pressing situation. So maybe our education can be directed or repurposed more into those sort of problems. Those are coming like next 20 years, 50 years. So yeah.
Right, Salman, I somehow connected when you said since the classrooms are being smaller, right? I feel the need is for more number of teachers, right? I think smaller classrooms help because you can more personalize, you can reach out to the individual students. But what we right now need is to have more number of teachers or more number of mentors. And we need to make that sustainable, which means we need to give livelihood, as people were speaking in the previous talk, to the mentors, right? We need to have equal amount of opportunity in terms of income for the teachers and mentors. And we got to increase the number of mentors there. Yeah, that was my thought about it.
Right. So basically, it's again like you have to have a funding or like continuous support for that, you know, to like to survival of the schools. Many of our schools are like they're shut down, they closed, and many of the teachers, even university teachers, my colleagues, they lost their jobs because it's online. Many of the laptops are terminated. So maybe I'm not sure, like maybe like creating a remodel the economy so that if this sort of situation come, we can like tackle that. I mean, circulation of money, circulation of units. I can say money will be a viable option after a few years from now. So later, I'm not an economist, so I can't like put a proper term on that. So yeah,
right.
Wow, thank you so much. This is like really insightful. Thank you. I saw Jim raise his hand, and now I don't know if they would like to say anything for that.
Yeah, I just want to add on. I agree with all of that. Again, coming from the perspective of a parent, I think the challenge with science education, at least here where we live, is that it's download-based and information-based rather than inquiry or challenge-based. And kids aren't being encouraged to ask questions, they're being encouraged to memorize. And it's actually turning a lot of kids off science. The excitement of science is getting hands-on, rolling up your sleeves, asking a question and seeing what happens. And when you see it in the science fair kids, they're doing amazing stuff. Or the robotics kids, they're building these amazing solutions to problems. The problem also is most of that is extracurricular. It requires mentors, and it's financially accessible to anybody outside of the upper middle class for the most case. So we're cutting off some bright minds. The school systems aren't cutting it. We need to reimagine how to learn.
Yeah, remodeling.
The future is hands-on. Yes, Salma, please continue.
Sorry, I'm just agreeing with Jim. That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Kenza, before we go, do you have anything you would like to share? Personally, I've had a great time today.
No worries. That was really nice conversation. I just took some notes of all of this. I believe they might be shared with you afterwards as well. And education-wise, I have a complex relationship, I guess, with that, since I grew up in Europe, so I got most of my education there, and then I came to the US, so I got to see kind of the difference between the way at least STEM is taught in Europe versus here. And it's funny, like I do feel like it's more applied here. And Jim, I'm not sure where you're located, but it sounds like you think the reverse. So I think it's interesting, and definitely I agree with the fact that all of these what are considered extracurricular activities, they should be main curriculum. I'm thinking even, if we think back to more biology, like iGEM, for example, is a great example of what I think most students are able to learn a ton about synthetic biology. And I feel like that should be something that should be a main curriculum where it's hands-on learning of science. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I think the breakout session. Okay. But now, do you have anything to say before we like run into the main group?
I love Miss Fischel and the Magic School Bus, so that was fun to hear that too. I think all the points that everyone brought up were relevant, and Orlando, I think there's a place for being discussing, potentially cynical perspectives. Like those are valid as well, right? You need to look at everything in this. So, no, this is great.
How amazing were the breakout rooms? Can we give snaps to everybody for breakouts, for our speakers, for everybody for participating. I love breakout sessions.
What's some feedback? We have about 7 minutes to wrap up here. What are some issues or ideas that came up in the breakout rooms? And you can just unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, now people can unmute themselves to speak. Before they couldn't. They should be able to now.
I
Yeah,
think
anybody?
that we should introduce the system that we are running right now is not very much inviting kids to ask questions, so that turns them off from science. The system promotes memorizing and just a conformity rather than really looking into the deep questions that science can answer. So I think that was a wonderful moment in our breakout room. How can we really be agents of change by supporting the questioning to the children?
Thank you so much, Christiana from Greece, for that wonderful insight. Does anyone from my breakout room want to mention what we were doing? Jennifer or someone else? I think the discussion about hyperlocal and indigenous.
Sure, I can touch base on it. We talked about how, on the one hand, this is a magnificent opportunity and we can use networks to communicate like we are right now with people all over, but we also really need to acknowledge that that is not accessible to everybody. And so we also need to really have a hyper local practices where we engage in maybe lower res, human to human contact. Particularly, we talked about working with Indigenous groups and valuing Indigenous knowledge equally with the Western canon towards creating maybe more collaborative knowledge production and collaborative education models that do not prioritize the sort of Western hierarchical canon. Does anyone else want to say anything from our group?
I think we're running out of time, so let's hit the other groups. Bushra, how about your group?
It was a pretty small group, but most of us who were there were from either developing countries or came from a similar background, I think, in terms of education. So Ola was there, Arvind was there, my co-founder was there, and we really talked about the values, and we really talked about changing very specific things that were necessary to bring about more transitional change in education. We really talked about, how COVID has made us realize what things are necessary, and more than so, things that are unnecessary, and the things that could be excluded, and in exchange of those, things that can be included to make the system better. And we also talked about integration of tech, and how a lot of times countries, developing or underdeveloping countries, fall back into those systems, but how also we can enable that within local communities and areas to bring about more tangible changes in education.
Yeah, all of that, all of that. Amanda, how about your group? What were you guys discussing?
Okay, yeah, so my group was, Christiana has actually said most of what we talked about, but I gave a little scenario or analysis of way back for the Magic School Bus, Mrs. Frizzle, that teaches scientific concepts with, giving them this experiential learning. So is it really imperative that we start integrating this blended learning so that students can go past, memorizing and all, to hands-on and, connecting science to real world applications, and also integrating it into our everyday life.
Very nice. Justice, Dr. Justice, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I think we had a really sort of engaging conversation and thinking about social construction as one example, and how it sort of reinforces a lot of the tensions that we know are problematic in science education in society. And we're thinking about how we as individuals might begin to practice as a single person better ways of creating a more equitable and inclusive, a different sort of structure than exists now. And I think we came to the conclusion that that begins with ourselves, and we have to be explicit about what that looks like on the day-to-day.
That is amazing. I think I love all of that. I know we're just about at time and we could keep talking about this. Carolyn, closing thoughts from you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for your participation. It's just really great to be able to come together and think about these ideas. They're so pertinent to so many of us right now. I think our focus really is on how our models can hand off power to the next generation. That's really where it's at now. How are we setting up a format that we hand off power, not that we abdicate our responsibility, but our central responsibility is to the future and the future lives, and how we equip both intellectually, hands-on, and in terms of social structures, the formats that are needed to get our students to where they have their feet on the ground to head that direction. So thank you all. It's just been a wonderful group of people.
If you guys enjoyed this, a huge reminder to apply to BioSummit, because we're gonna have 3 days of discussions on this and other topics. So this is what we do at BioSummit. We discuss things outside the box. We have 10 really exciting tracks. Education is one of them. Justice and Amanda are, Amanda Strawhacker are two of the folks leading the education panel. So please sign up, please join us October 9th, 10th, and 11th so we can talk about this more.
All right. And organizers, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then reconvene to debrief just shortly afterwards. So see you all at the BioSummit, at the fellowship, at all the things we're doing. Thank you so much.